The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council stood silent as Scout Commander Velthra entered through the massive doors. Her scaled hands trembled slightly as she clutched the data tablet containing her report. The chamber was enormous, built to intimidate visitors with its crystal walls that reached up hundreds of feet into the purple sky of Zenthar Prime. Around the circular room sat the council members, representing the greatest minds and leaders of the Zenthari Empire. They looked down at her from their elevated platforms, their faces showing various degrees of boredom and impatience. Velthra had served the Empire for 40 years. She had explored dozens of star systems and catalogued hundreds of species. She had faced dangers that would make most soldiers flee in terror, but standing here before the council made her feel small and powerless. She knew what she was about to say would sound insane to them. She knew they would not believe her, but she had to try. High Chancellor Vormak sat at the highest platform, his ancient body barely visible beneath the ceremonial robes that marked his station. He had ruled the Empire for 300 years, and his face showed every one of them. Deep wrinkles carved paths across his blue skin, and his eyes held the confident certainty of someone who had never been truly challenged. Scout Commander Velthra, Vormak's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by technology embedded in the walls. You have requested this emergency session. The Council hopes your findings justify interrupting our schedule. We were discussing important matters of taxation policy. Velthra stepped forward to the center of the chamber. A holographic projector activated above her, ready to display her evidence. She took a deep breath and began. Honored Council members, I bring urgent news from the Orion Spur region, approximately 26,000 light-years from our core territories. My scout team has discovered a species that poses a significant threat to the Empire's future stability and expansion. Several council members shifted in their seats. A few whispered to each other. Ambassador Krell, a younger member known for his careful consideration, leaned forward with interest, but most looked skeptical. Continue, Vormak said, waving one hand dismissively. Velthra activated the hologram. An image appeared showing a blue and green planet, beautiful in its simplicity. This is the third planet in a system the locals call Sol. The planet itself is designated Earth. It is home to a species that calls themselves humans. They look primitive enough, commented Council Member Drexnor, squinting at the hologram showing several images of humans in various activities. What threat could such underdeveloped creatures possibly pose? That is what I thought initially, Velthra admitted. But after 6 months of observation, I have concluded that these humans represent the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. The chamber erupted in laughter. Council members chuckled and made jokes to one another. Only Krell and a few others remained silent, watching Velthra carefully. Vormak raised a hand and the laughter stopped. Commander, the Zenthari Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We have encountered and catalogued over 60,000 sentient species. We have conquered 10,000 worlds. Not once has any species posed a genuine threat to our dominance. What makes these humans special? Velthra changed the hologram, showing detailed biological scans. First, their homeworld. By galactic standards, Earth is what we classify as a death world. The gravity is 1.0 standard units. Most species in the Empire evolved on worlds with 0.6 to 0.8 gravity. Humans evolved in conditions that would cripple most of us. They are simply adapted to their environment, Drexnor scoffed. Many species are strong. It goes beyond strength, Velthra insisted. She pulled up more data. Humans are endurance predators. On their world, they hunted prey not by being faster or stronger, but by chasing them until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. A human can run for hours without stopping. They can survive in temperatures that range from far below freezing to extreme heat. They can eat an enormous variety of foods, including many things that would poison other species. They heal rapidly from injuries that would be fatal to us. The hologram shifted again, showing human military conflicts throughout history. But their physical abilities are not what concerns me most. It is their psychology. Humans are tribal pack-bonding creatures. They form intense emotional connections not just with their own kind, but with anything they perceive as part of their group. We observe them bonding with other species on their planet, keeping them as companions even though there is no practical benefit. Sentimental fools, someone muttered. No, Velthra said firmly. This pack bonding creates intense loyalty. A human will die to protect a member of their pack without hesitation. They do not calculate odds or consider retreat when their group is threatened. This is not stupidity. It is a survival strategy that has made them the apex predators on a world filled with creatures larger and stronger than them. She pulled up images of human warfare. They have been in a state of near-constant warfare for their entire recorded history. They fight each other with shocking brutality and innovation. They have created weapons of incredible destructive power. Recently, they have developed nuclear fission weapons capable of destroying entire cities. And what is their technological level? Vormak asked, sounding bored. They have just entered their atomic age. They have primitive chemical rockets. They have recently sent their first satellites into orbit. Their fastest ships use chemical combustion. By our standards, they are thousands of years behind us technologically. Then I fail to see the threat, Vormak said flatly. You describe a primitive species trapped on their homeworld, fighting themselves with crude weapons. When they finally develop space travel in another 1,000 years, perhaps we can reassess. But for now they are irrelevant. With respect, High Chancellor, you are wrong, Velthra said, her voice rising with urgency. I have studied their history. Humans advance technologically at an exponential rate. 500 years ago they were hitting each other with metal swords. 300 years ago they discovered industrial power. 100 years ago they learned to fly. 50 years ago, they split the atom. In my 6 months observing them, they launched their first artificial satellite and put a human into space. She changed the hologram again, showing graphs and projections. If their advancement continues at this rate, and I have no reason to believe it will not, they will achieve faster than light travel within 50 to 100 years. And when they do, they will explode into the galaxy like a supernova. Assuming they do not destroy themselves first, Krell spoke up, his first words of the session. You mentioned they fight constantly. Perhaps they will solve our problem for us. I thought that too, Velthra admitted, but I have analyzed hundreds of their conflicts. Yes, they fight each other. Yes, they are violent and aggressive. But they also cooperate on a scale we rarely see in nature. After their most devastating war, which killed tens of millions of their own people, they created global organizations to prevent future wars. They share scientific knowledge. They help each other during natural disasters. They are capable of both extreme violence and surprising compassion. She zoomed the hologram in on Earth, focusing on one specific region. And most concerning of all, they are beginning to unite. For most of their history, they were divided into thousands of small tribal groups. Over time, these consolidated into hundreds of nations. Now, those nations are forming alliances and unions. They are slowly, inevitably, becoming a unified species. When that happens, when billions of these persistence predators work together with singular purpose, nothing will stop them. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then Vormak spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. Scout Commander Velthra, your service to the Empire has been noted. However, your conclusions are based on speculation and fear. You describe a species that might, possibly in the distant future, become advanced enough to be noticed by us. This is not a threat. This is barely worth the data storage to keep the report. But, High Chancellor. Silence. Vormak's voice cracked like a whip. The Zenthari Empire spans 1,000 star systems. Our fleets number in the tens of thousands. Our warriors are trained from birth. Our technology has been refined over millennia. And you expect us to fear a species that has not even left their homeworld? A species that fights with chemical explosives and metal projectiles? Velthra felt her heart sinking, but she pressed on. I recommend we establish a monitoring station in their system. We should track their development. And if they begin to approach faster than light capability, we should consider containment options. Containment? Drexnor laughed. You mean genocide. You want us to exterminate a species because you are afraid of what they might become. I want us to be prepared, Velthra said. I want us to understand what we might be facing. We have faced and defeated countless species, Vormak said, standing from his throne. His aged body straightened, and for a moment, Velthra could see the powerful leader he had once been. Species with natural armor, species with psychic abilities, species with technology we had to study for years to understand, and in every case we have prevailed. Not through fear and paranoia, but through confidence in our superiority. He gestured dismissively at the hologram of Earth. These humans, if they ever become relevant, will be just another species to catalog and incorporate into the Empire. If they resist, we will show them the futility of standing against us. But I will not waste council time or Imperial resources monitoring every primitive species that learns to make fire and swing clubs. They are more than that, Velthra said desperately. Please just read my full report. Study their history. See what I have seen. Your report will be filed in the archives, Vormak said, along with 10,000 other reports about species that never amounted to anything. This session is concluded. High Chancellor, I beg you, this session is concluded. Vormak's voice boomed through the chamber. And Scout Commander Velthra, your paranoia and alarmist conclusions are noted in your service record. You are hereby reassigned to dock patrol duty in the Outer Territories. Perhaps time away from exploration will help you regain perspective. Velthra felt her career crumbling around her. Dock patrol was a punishment detail, given to soldiers who had failed or embarrassed the military. But she made one final attempt. In 50 years, when humans arrive in ships of their own, remember this day. Remember that I warned you. In 50 years, Vormak said coldly, I will still be sitting on this council, and you will be a forgotten footnote in some dusty file. Dismissed. Velthra was escorted from the chamber by guards. As the doors closed behind her, she heard the council members laughing and returning to their discussions of taxation policy. Only Ambassador Krell remained silent, staring at the hologram of Earth that still floated in the chamber center. Krell had a strange feeling in his stomach. He had served on the council for only 20 years, which made him young by their standards. He had seen the confidence of the Empire, the casual certainty that nothing could challenge their dominance. But he had also studied history. He knew that every great empire in galactic history had eventually fallen, usually because they became too arrogant to see threats until it was too late. He pulled up Velthra's full report on his personal tablet and began to read. The more he read, the more concerned he became. Everything she said was backed by solid data and careful observation. These humans were remarkable in ways that should concern anyone paying attention. But Krell was just one voice among hundreds on the council, and in an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 12,000 years, no one wanted to hear that the future might be different from the past. The data tablet containing Velthra's report was filed in the Imperial Archives under reference number 4857 ORS 0142. It sat there, unread and forgotten, gathering digital dust. Earth continued spinning through space, unaware that it had been noticed and dismissed by an empire of 10,000 worlds. Humans continued their lives, fighting their small wars, building their primitive machines and dreaming of the stars. And in the decades that followed, not one member of the Zenthari Empire thought about the warning they had received. Not one ship was sent to monitor the Sol system. Not one contingency plan was made. They would have 50 years to prepare for first contact with humanity. They wasted every single one of them. 50 years had passed since Scout Commander Velthra stood before the Galactic Council and delivered her warning. The Empire had forgotten about the primitive species called humans, if most people had ever known about them at all. The report remained buried in the archives, and Velthra herself had retired to a quiet colony world after decades of boring dock patrol duty. But in the Sol system, everything had changed. Humanity had reached for the stars with both hands and pulled themselves upward through sheer determination and innovation. The same species that had been testing primitive chemical rockets 5 decades ago now possessed functional faster-than-light drives. The breakthrough had come from a combination of human theoretical physics and discoveries made in the Kuiper Belt, where strange particles behaved in ways that suggested space itself could be folded. The first human colony ship, christened the New Horizon, had left Earth 15 years earlier. It carried 10,000 colonists to Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to Sol. More ships followed. Humanity spread outward like a wave, establishing colonies on worlds they considered marginal but livable. These were planets that the Xanthari Empire had surveyed and dismissed as too hostile or resource-poor to bother with. Humans did not care. They terraformed. They adapted. They built underground cities on frozen moons and floating platforms on gas giants. They were not looking for paradise worlds. They were looking for room to grow. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Terran Defense Force flagship Indomitable, watching the scanner readouts with careful attention. She was 53 years old with silver streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too much but missed nothing. She had commanded defensive fleets for 20 years, ever since humanity made first contact with an alien species and realized they were not alone in the universe. That first contact had been peaceful. A Xanthari merchant ship had stumbled across a human mining operation in an asteroid belt and been shocked to find the system inhabited by FTL-capable beings. The merchant captain had filed a report, which had worked its way slowly through Imperial bureaucracy. And now, 2 years after that first contact, the Empire had finally sent an official delegation. "Admiral, the Xanthari fleet is approaching the rendezvous point," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her tactical officer. 50 ships, heavy cruiser class and above. "They are maintaining weapons-ready status," Sarah frowned. A delegation of 50 warships seemed excessive for a diplomatic mission. But she kept her voice calm. "Maintain defensive posture. Launch no weapons, but keep our railguns charged and missiles ready." "Yes, Admiral." The human fleet numbered only 20 ships and they were smaller than the Xanthari vessels. But Sarah had studied every bit of intelligence humanity had gathered on Xanthari technology. She knew their weaknesses. She knew their tactics. And she knew that humans had one advantage the Xanthari might not expect. Humans were willing to take risks that no rational species would consider. The communication channel opened, and a holographic image appeared on the bridge. It showed a Xanthari commander in ornate armor, his blue skin marked with the ritual scars of high rank. His expression was one of casual superiority. "I am Fleet Commander Zarthon of the Xanthari Imperial Navy. I am here to present terms to your government." Sarah smiled politely, though inside she felt a surge of anger at the commander's tone. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We welcome diplomatic contact with the Xanthari Empire. Perhaps we should arrange for our respective ambassadors to meet." "That will not be necessary," Zarthon said dismissively. "The Empire's position is simple. Your species has been expanding into territory claimed by the Empire for thousands of years. This is unacceptable. You will immediately cease all colonization efforts and accept protectorate status under Imperial authority." Sarah's smile did not waver, but her eyes went cold. "Could you explain what protectorate status entails?" "Your species will be granted the privilege of Imperial protection. In exchange, you will pay annual tribute, accept Imperial governors on your worlds, and restrict your technological development to levels approved by the Council. Your military will be disbanded. Your expansion will cease. These are generous terms for a species so new to galactic civilization." "I see," Sarah said calmly. "And if we decline these generous terms?" Zarthon looked surprised, as if he had not considered that possibility. "Decline? Your species controls perhaps a dozen star systems. The Empire controls 10,000. You have built your fleet for perhaps 2 decades. The Empire's fleets have maintained order for 12,000 years. Declining is not a rational option. Commander Zarthon, humanity thanks the Empire for their offer. However, we must respectfully decline. We claim the right to expand freely into unclaimed space and to determine our own destiny. We seek peace with the Empire, but we will not accept subjugation." The silence that followed was heavy. Zarthon's expression shifted from surprise to something like pity. "Admiral Chen, I do not think you understand your situation. The Empire does not negotiate with species that refuse protectorate status. You will comply, or you will be forced to comply. This is simply the natural order of the galaxy." "The natural order is about to change," Sarah said quietly. Zarthon laughed. "You are brave. I respect that. But bravery without wisdom is simply foolishness. I will give you 1 solar day to consult with your government. When I return, you will accept our terms, or we will blockade your homeworld until you do." This conversation is concluded. The hologram vanished. Sarah turned to her crew, all of whom were staring at her with a mixture of fear and determination. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Send our full sensor logs of the Xanthari fleet. And someone find out if anyone in the archives has any old reports about the Empire. I want to know everything we can learn about them in the next 24 hours. What Sarah did not know was that deep in Earth's United Nations archives, a low-level analyst named David Rodriguez was about to make a remarkable discovery. David had been tasked with searching for any historical records of alien contact, hoping to find something useful for the current crisis. He had been digging through files for 6 hours when he found it. Reference number 4857 ORS 0142. A Zenthari report filed 50 years earlier about a primitive species in the Sol system. David read through the translation with growing amazement. This scout commander, Velthra, had tried to warn her empire about humanity. She had understood what humans were capable of becoming, and the empire had ignored her. David immediately forwarded the report to Admiral Chen with a simple message. They knew. They were warned. They didn't listen. When Sarah read the report, she felt a grim satisfaction settle over her. The Empire thought humans were primitive and foolish. They had no idea what they were walking into. The 24 hours passed. The Zenthari fleet returned to the rendezvous point. Zarthon opened communications again, clearly expecting humanity's surrender. Admiral Chen, have you reached a decision? We have, Sarah said. Humanity rejects the Empire's demands. We will defend our right to exist as a free species. Zarthon's expression hardened. Then you have chosen your fate. My fleet will proceed to Earth and establish a blockade. Once your people begin to starve, perhaps you will be more reasonable. You are welcome to try, Sarah said. But I should warn you. Humans do not respond well to threats. We shall see. Zarthon cut the communication. The Zenthari fleet began moving toward Earth, clearly confident in their overwhelming superiority. Sarah watched them come and gave the order she had been preparing for hours. All ships execute Alpha Protocol. Let us show them what humans learned from predators. The human fleet did not meet the Zenthari head-on. Instead, they scattered, using the asteroids and debris of the outer solar system as cover. The Zenthari fleet, expecting a traditional battle formation, found themselves hunting for targets in a three-dimensional maze. Then the ambush began. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, fired their railguns at point-blank range, and disappeared again before the Zenthari could respond. Railgun slugs, simple pieces of metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, punched through Zenthari shields that were designed to stop energy weapons. The Empire had not fought anyone who used kinetic weapons in centuries. 3 Zenthari ships exploded in the first salvo. Zarthon screamed orders trying to organize his fleet, but the humans were not fighting like any enemy he had faced. They were fighting like guerrillas, like ambush predators, like persistence hunters who would take down prey piece by piece. A human destroyer, the Defiant, made a suicide run at a Zenthari heavy cruiser. The captain, knowing his ship was damaged and losing air, accelerated to ramming speed and detonated his fusion core on impact. The explosion took out the cruiser and damaged 2 more ships nearby. Fall back, Zarthon finally ordered. Fall back to formation distance. The Zenthari fleet retreated, shocked and disorganized. They had lost 3 ships destroyed and 7 damaged. The human fleet had lost 2 ships. In any rational calculation, the Zenthari still held overwhelming advantage. But Zarthon felt something he had not experienced in his entire military career: uncertainty. Sarah opened a channel to the retreating fleet. Commander Zarthon, you have seen what happens when you threaten humanity. Leave our system now and we will call this a misunderstanding. Continue your blockade and we will destroy your entire fleet piece by piece. You are insane, Zarthon said, his voice shaking. You cannot win. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Empire will send 100 more. Then we will destroy those too, Sarah said simply. We are humans. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We will fight you for 1,000 years if we must. The question is, how many of your people are you willing to sacrifice to enslave ours? Zarthon stared at her through the hologram, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that frightened him. It was not hatred or anger. It was absolute certainty. This human truly believed her species could defeat the Empire, and in that moment, Zarthon remembered an old report he had once read in the military academy, written by a scout commander named Velthra. A report that had described humans as the most dangerous species the Empire might ever encounter. Everyone had laughed at that report. No one was laughing now. I will relay your response to the High Council, Zarthon said quietly. But know this. You have made an enemy of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. You will regret this decision. We will see, Sarah said. Now leave our space. The Xanthari fleet withdrew, limping back toward Imperial territory with their damaged ships and wounded pride. When they reported what had happened, High Chancellor Vormak, now almost 400 years old, sat in his throne and listened in disbelief. Impossible, he said. 3 ships lost to primitives with chemical weapons. Kinetic weapons, Excellency, the messenger corrected carefully. Very advanced kinetic weapons, and they fought with tactics we have never encountered. They showed no regard for their own safety. They seemed willing to die to inflict damage on us. Vormak was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with grim determination. Prepare the full battle fleet. We will teach these humans the price of defying the Empire. In the corner of the council chamber, Ambassador Krell, now an elder statesman himself, closed his eyes and sighed. He had read Velthra's report 50 years ago. He had known this day might come, but he had not been able to convince anyone else. The war was about to begin, and the Empire still did not understand what they were facing. The war had been raging for 10 years, and the galaxy was learning what Scout Commander Velthra had tried to warn them about decades ago. Humanity was not like other species. They did not fight wars the way civilized beings were supposed to fight. They fought like cornered animals, like wounded predators, like a force of nature that could not be reasoned with or stopped. Colonel James Rodriguez, callsign Reaper, crouched in the ruins of what had once been a Xanthari military base on Proxima Centauri B. His combat armor was scarred and dented, the optical camouflage system flickering as its power cell ran low. Around him, the 12 remaining members of his Special Forces team checked their weapons and prepared for what would likely be their final mission. They had been behind enemy lines for 3 months. The Xanthari Empire had captured Proxima Centauri 2 years into the war, and they had held it ever since despite humanity's best efforts to retake it. The planet had become a symbol for both sides. For the Empire, it represented their inevitable victory. For humanity, it represented their refusal to give up even a single inch of ground. Reaper, this is Overwatch, crackled the voice in his helmet. The signal was weak. Bounced through 3 relay satellites to avoid Xanthari detection. Target confirmed. The Xanthari are bringing in their new fleet commander for an inspection tour. High-value target. Authorization is green for Operation Payback. James smiled grimly behind his helmet. Fleet Commander Darvex was the strategist who had planned the siege of Proxima. He was brilliant, ruthless, and responsible for the deaths of 40,000 human colonists. The Empire thought he was safe here, deep in their occupied territory. They were wrong. Overwatch, Reaper team confirms. We are moving to intercept. If we do not report back in 6 hours, assume mission success and KIA. Understood, Reaper. Humanity thanks you for your service. Humanity can thank us by winning this war, James replied. He switched to his team channel. All right, Ghosts. You know the drill. We get in, we take out the target, and we get out. Or we take out the target and paint the walls with our heroic sacrifice. Either way, Darvex dies today. His team responded with grim determination. They were all volunteers. They all knew the odds. And they all knew that if they succeeded, they might save thousands of human lives in future battles. They moved through the ruins like shadows, using the terrain they had studied for weeks. The Xanthari had sensors and patrols, but humans had learned to exploit every weakness in Imperial technology. Their armor used metamaterials that scattered scanner beams. They moved during the specific times when Xanthari guards changed shifts. They had mapped every patrol route and every blind spot. The Xanthari were advanced, but they followed patterns. They believed in order and proper military procedure. Humans believed in chaos and improvisation. The inspection tour was taking place in a fortified command center at the heart of the base. Fleet Commander Darvex walked through the facility with a retinue of officers, examining the defenses and offering suggestions for improvement. He felt completely safe. After all, humans had not penetrated this far into Xanthari-held territory in over a year. James and his team reached the outer wall of the command center. They placed shaped charges at precise points, calculated to create a breach without triggering the automated defense systems. On James's signal, they detonated. The explosion was small but perfectly placed. The wall collapsed inward and the team poured through the gap before the dust settled. Xanthari soldiers scrambled for weapons, but they were too slow. Human reflexes, honed by evolution on a high-gravity death world, were faster. James's rifle fired in controlled bursts, each shot finding its target with lethal precision. His team spread out, securing the corridors with brutal efficiency. They had trained for this. They had practiced this exact scenario 100 times. Darvex heard the commotion and tried to flee to a secure room, but James was already there. The two locked eyes for a brief moment. The Zenthari commander's expression showed shock and disbelief. How had humans penetrated so deep into his fortress? "For Proxima," James said simply, and pulled the trigger. The mission took less than 5 minutes from breach to exfiltration. James's team extracted the way they had come, moving fast before Zenthari reinforcements could respond. They made it to the rendezvous point where a stealth shuttle waited, engines already hot. 3 team members did not make it. They were cut off by a Zenthari patrol and made the choice to stay behind, providing covering fire so the others could escape. James heard their final transmissions as the shuttle lifted off. "Reaper, this is Ghost 3, we are not getting out of this. Tell my family I love them, and tell the Empire to go to hell." The transmission ended in weapons fire and explosions. James closed his eyes, added 3 more names to the list of people he would never forget, and reported mission success to Earth Command. The death of Fleet Commander Darvex sent shockwaves through the Zenthari military. He was the 3rd high-ranking officer assassinated by human special forces in the past year. The Empire's commanders began to realize that nowhere was safe, that humans could strike anywhere at any time. The psychological impact was enormous, but the war was far from over. If anything, it was escalating. On the bridge of the Zenthari flagship Eternal Glory, Scout Commander Velthra stood next to High Marshal Krenzak and watched the tactical display. She had been recalled from retirement 6 years into the war, when the Empire finally realized they needed officers who understood humanity. She was now a senior strategic advisor, and she took no satisfaction in being proven right. "The humans have fortified their position around Wolf 359, Krenzak said, studying the holographic display. "Intelligence suggests they have been building ships at an accelerated rate. Their industrial capacity has increased by 400% since the war began. That is what they do," Velthra said quietly. "They adapt. They improve. They turn their entire civilization into a war machine when threatened. We will break them at Wolf 359, Krenzak said confidently. "I have assembled a fleet of 600 ships. They have perhaps 150 defending the system. The mathematics are clear." "The mathematics mean nothing when fighting humans," Velthra warned. "Have you studied their tactics at Mars? At Europa? At Titan? I have studied all their battles. They fight with courage and innovation, I grant you. But courage cannot overcome a 4-to-1 numerical advantage." Velthra wanted to argue further, but she knew it would be pointless. The Empire's military leadership still believed they could win through superior numbers and technology. They still did not understand what they were fighting. The Battle of Wolf 359 began 3 weeks later. The Zenthari fleet entered the system in perfect formation, a textbook display of Imperial military might. Sensors detected the human fleet waiting near the system's second planet, holding a defensive position. Krenzak smiled. "They are going to make a stand. Good. We will crush them in a single engagement and break their will to fight." The Zenthari fleet advanced. The human fleet held position, weapons charging. At optimal firing range, both sides opened fire simultaneously. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for generations. The human fleet's first volley was not aimed at the Zenthari ships. It was aimed at the star itself. At specific points on the stellar surface where solar storms were already forming, the missiles detonated, triggering a cascade reaction that sent a massive coronal mass ejection toward the Zenthari fleet. The wave of charged particles and electromagnetic radiation hit the Imperial ships before they could react. Shields flickered and failed. Communication systems were disrupted. Sensors went blind. And in that moment of chaos, the human fleet attacked. They did not stay in formation. They scattered into small groups, each one independent and autonomous. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously, targeting command ships and breaking the Zenthari formation into fragments. Human pilots flew their ships in patterns that violated every rule of space combat, using maneuvers that subjected them to gravitational forces that would cripple most species. A Zenthari heavy cruiser fired its main cannon at a human destroyer, only to watch the destroyer accelerate directly into the beam, using its forward armor and electromagnetic shielding to absorb the hit long enough to get into point-blank range. The destroyer fired every weapon it had, then rammed the cruiser at full speed. Both ships were destroyed, but the explosion took out 2 more Xanthari vessels that had been in close formation.
They are insane,
Someone shouted on the Eternal Glories bridge. They are deliberately destroying themselves. They are trading one ship for 3 or 4 of ours, Velthra said grimly. By their calculation, that is an acceptable exchange rate. Admiral Sarah Chen, now commanding the human defense fleet from the carrier Resolute, watched the battle unfold with calm satisfaction. This was exactly what she had planned. The Xanthari thought in terms of preserving ships and minimizing casualties. Humans thought in terms of winning at any cost. All squadrons execute Pattern Omega, she ordered. Show them what desperation looks like. Human fighters, small craft that the Xanthari barely considered threats, began suicide runs against Imperial capital ships. They were equipped with fusion warheads and piloted by volunteers who knew they were not coming back. Each fighter that made it through point defense took out a ship 1,000 times its size. The Xanthari fleet began to break. Ships retreated without orders. Commanders who had never faced a real threat in their careers panicked when they realized their ships were dying, despite their technological superiority. The perfect Imperial formation dissolved into chaos. Krenzak stared at the tactical display in horror. This is not possible. We had 4-to-1 numerical superiority. We have superior technology. How are we losing? Because you still do not understand them, Velthra said. She felt tired and old. They are not fighting to preserve their fleet. They are fighting to preserve their species. There is no sacrifice too great. No loss too heavy. They will spend every ship, every pilot, every bullet if it means survival. The Battle of Wolf 359 ended with the Xanthari fleet in full retreat. They had lost 300 ships. The humans had lost 90. By any rational analysis, both sides had suffered catastrophic casualties. But only one side considered it a victory. News of the defeat spread through the Empire like a virus. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Xanthari people began to question whether the war was winnable. Protests erupted on the homeworlds. Families mourned soldiers who had been sent to fight an enemy they did not understand. On Earth, in the human colonies, there was no celebration. 90 ships meant nearly 30,000 dead crew members. But there was grim determination. They had proven they could face the Empire and win. The question was whether they could sustain the losses. High Chancellor Vormak called an emergency session of the Council. He stood before them, his ancient body shaking with rage and fear. We must commit more resources. Build more ships. Conscript more soldiers. The humans must be defeated, whatever the cost. Ambassador Krell, now one of the senior council members, stood to speak. High Chancellor, perhaps it is time to consider an alternative. We could sue for peace, recognize human sovereignty. End this war before it destroys us both. Peace? Vormak's voice was venomous. Peace with the species that has killed hundreds of thousands of our citizens? Peace with beings who fight like rabid animals? No, we will crush them. We will grind them into dust. And then we will make an example of their world so that no other species ever dares defy us again. Then we are lost, Krell said quietly, because humans will never surrender, and we cannot afford to fight them forever. But Vormak was beyond reason. He ordered the construction of 1,000 new ships. He mobilized every reserve force. He prepared for a final, decisive campaign that would end the human threat once and for all. Neither side knew that the war was about to enter its darkest phase. Neither side could see that they were both approaching a point of no return. And in a small apartment on a colony world far from the fighting, retired Scout Commander Velthra sat alone and wept. She had tried to warn them. She had told them what humans were capable of. And now millions were dead on both sides because no one had listened. The war ground on, consuming everything in its path, and the galaxy watched in horror as 2 species fought each other toward mutual destruction. 15 years. The war had been consuming the galaxy for 15 brutal years, and neither side showed any sign of surrender. The conflict had expanded far beyond anyone's initial expectations, spreading across dozens of star systems and drawing in species that had once considered themselves neutral observers. High Chancellor Vormak sat in his private chambers, looking older than his 415 years. Reports covered his desk, each one more dire than the last. The Empire's economy was strained to the breaking point. Worlds that had paid tribute for thousands of years were now questioning why they should support a war that seemed to have no end. And worst of all, the humans continued to adapt and improve at a rate that defied all logical projections. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Intelligence Director Masavek. The director looked exhausted. "High Chancellor, we have confirmed the reports. Humanity has been making contact with species we previously incorporated into the Empire. They are offering them independence in exchange for alliance against us." Vormak felt his blood run cold. "Which species?" "So far the Vrin, the Kostel, and the Meridian Collective. All three have accepted humanity's offer. They are coordinating with human forces to attack our supply lines. That is treason. Those species swore loyalty to the Empire. They swore loyalty because we gave them no choice, Excellency. The humans are offering them something we never did. Freedom." Vormak slammed his fist on the desk. "Seal all communication with those systems. Send battle fleets to bring them back into compliance. Make examples of their leadership. Excellency, we do not have enough ships. Our fleets are stretched across 40 active war zones. If we pull ships from one front to handle these rebellions, the humans will exploit the weakness. Then conscript more. Build more. Do whatever is necessary." Masavek hesitated before speaking again. "Excellency, there is something else. Our intelligence has discovered that humanity is constructing something in a hidden shipyard in the Kuiper belt of their home system. The facility is massive, possibly the largest construction project they have ever undertaken. We do not know what they are building, but given the resources they are dedicating to it, we must assume it represents a significant threat. Send a fleet to destroy the facility." "We tried, Excellency, 3 times. Each time, human defenses have pushed us back. Whatever they are building, they consider it vital enough to dedicate half their military to protecting it." Vormak stood and walked to the window, looking out over the capital city of Zenthar Prime. The streets below were filled with mourners wearing the traditional blue cloths of grief. Every family in the Empire had lost someone to the war. The grand buildings and monuments that had stood for thousands of years now felt like tombstones marking a dying civilization. "How did it come to this?" Vormak whispered. "We are the Zenthari Empire. We have ruled the galaxy since before most species learned to make fire. How are we losing to beings who were primitive savages just 50 years ago?" "Because they learn, Excellency," came a voice from the doorway. Ambassador Krell entered without being announced, his face grim. "They learn from every battle. They analyze every tactic we use and develop counters. They steal our technology and improve it. They turn our own strategies against us. And most importantly, they never give up. I did not send for you, Ambassador. No, but the Council did. They sent me to deliver a message, sue for peace. End this war before the Empire tears itself apart." "Never," Vormak said, his voice hard as steel. "I will die before I show weakness to those animals." "Then you will die and you will take the Empire with you," Krell said. "Excellency, I have studied every war in recorded history. Do you know what all failed empires have in common? They refused to recognize when they could no longer win. They fought until they had nothing left to fight with. We can still win. One decisive battle. One overwhelming show of force. We have been saying that for 15 years. After every defeat, we claim the next battle will be different. But it never is. The humans keep finding ways to survive, and we keep losing ships we cannot replace." The argument was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the government complex. Both men rushed to the communication center, where military staff were frantically working at their stations. "What is happening?" Vormak demanded. "Excellency, we are detecting massive hyperspace signatures, multiple fleets emerging from FTL near the outer system. Counting, at least. By the stars, there are over 500 ships. Whose ships?" The officer's voice trembled as he answered. "Human, Excellency. And Vrin and Kostel, and a dozen other species. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. They are demanding our surrender." Vormak felt the room spin around him. "That is impossible. The humans cannot have that many ships. Our intelligence said—" "Our intelligence was wrong," Krell said quietly. "This is what they were building. Not just ships, but an alliance. While we focused on destroying them, they were uniting the galaxy against us." The holographic display activated, showing the face of Admiral Sarah Chen. She looked older now, her hair completely gray, but her eyes held the same determined fire they had 15 years ago. "High Chancellor Vormak, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Coalition. I am speaking to you from the bridge of the TCS Unity, flagship of the largest Allied fleet ever assembled. We are here to end this war. You dare attack our homeworld? Vormak shouted. This is an act of barbarism. This is an act of necessity, Sarah replied calmly. You have refused every offer of peace. You have continued to attack our colonies and our allies. You have forced us to bring the war to your doorstep. But even now, even after everything you have done, we offer you one final chance. Surrender. Disarm your fleets. Accept a peace treaty that guarantees the sovereignty of all species, including your own. Or we will do what you tried to do to us. We will destroy your ability to wage war. I will never surrender to you. Then you doom your own people, Sarah said. She looked genuinely sad. I have been fighting this war for 15 years. I have seen good people on both sides die for no reason except your pride. I am tired of it. Your citizens are tired of it. The galaxy is tired of it. Please, for the sake of everyone who will die in the next hour if you refuse, make the right choice. Vormak opened his mouth to speak, but Ambassador Krell stepped forward and cut the communication channel. He turned to face the shocked High Chancellor. Excellency, I am invoking Emergency Protocol 7. As senior member of the Council present, I am assuming temporary authority to prevent an imminent threat to the Empire's survival. You dare commit treason? I dare save our civilization, Krell said firmly. He turned to the military staff. Contact the human fleet. Tell them we are willing to negotiate. And someone get me the rest of the Council on a secure channel. Vormak lunged at Krell, but security officers had already moved to intercept. The ancient Chancellor was gently but firmly restrained and escorted from the command center. He screamed threats and accusations as he was taken away, but his voice grew distant. Krell felt no satisfaction in what he had done. He had just committed an act that would either save the Empire or condemn him as history's greatest traitor. But as he looked at the tactical display showing the combined fleet of hundreds of ships representing dozens of species, all united under human leadership, he knew there was no other choice. The Zenthari home fleet moved to intercept the Allied forces, but their heart was not in it. Word of Krell's action had spread instantly through the military. Commanders who had been fighting a losing war for 15 years suddenly had permission to stop. One by one, Zenthari ships began standing down, powering down weapons and requesting negotiation. A few loyalist commanders tried to continue the fight, but they were quickly overwhelmed or ordered to surrender by their own crews. The sailors had families on the planet below. They had no desire to see their homeworld become another battlefield. The Battle of Zenthar Prime, which could have been the bloodiest engagement in galactic history, ended before it truly began. Not with a bang, but with the quiet acceptance that the old order had finally ended. Negotiations took place on a neutral station hastily constructed in orbit. Admiral Sarah Chen sat across a table from Ambassador Krell, now acting as the Empire's sole representative. Between them lay the terms of surrender. These terms are remarkably generous, Krell admitted, reading through the document. You are not demanding tribute or reparations. You are not occupying our worlds. You are simply asking for mutual recognition and non-aggression. We are asking for peace, Sarah said. That is all humanity ever wanted. We did not start this war, Ambassador. We do not want to continue it. We just want to exist without someone trying to conquer us. What about the other species? The ones you liberated from our control? They are free to govern themselves. If they want to rejoin a reformed empire that treats them as equals rather than subjects, that is their choice. If they want to join the Terran Coalition, that is also their choice. Freedom means having options. Krell signed the treaty with a heavy heart. He knew that back on Zenthar Prime, there would be those who called him a coward and a traitor. But he also knew that he had saved billions of lives. I read a report once, Krell said as he handed the signed document back to Sarah. 50 years ago, a scout commander named Velthra tried to warn us about your species. She said you were the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. We laughed at her. She was right to warn you, Sarah said. We are dangerous, but not in the way you thought. Our danger is not in our weapons or our ships. It is in our refusal to accept that might makes right. It is in our belief that all beings deserve freedom and dignity. That is the idea that will change the galaxy. It already has, Krell said quietly. News of the treaty spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every city. On the human colonies, people wept with relief that their children would not have to fight anymore. On Xanthari worlds, the reaction was mixed. Some felt shame at their defeat. Others felt relief that the dying would finally stop. High Chancellor Vormak, under house arrest in his palace, refused to acknowledge the treaty. He spent his final days writing bitter letters about betrayal and weakness, letters that no one read. He died 2 years later, never accepting that his empire had fundamentally changed. Scout Commander Velthra, now ancient and frail, received a visit from Admiral Sarah Chen herself. The human admiral traveled across the galaxy to meet the Xanthari, who had tried to warn her people 50 years earlier. "I read your report," Sarah said, sitting beside Velthra's bed. "You understood us before we even understood ourselves." "I tried to warn them," Velthra said, her voice weak. "I told them you would be dangerous. You were right. We were dangerous. We still are. But you were also wrong about one thing." "What is that?" "You thought we would be a threat. But we could have been allies all along. If your empire had approached us with respect instead of demands, we would have gladly joined the galactic community. All of this death, all of this suffering could have been avoided." Velthra closed her eyes, a tear running down her scaled face. "I know, I am sorry. I tried to prevent this, but I failed." "You did not fail," Sarah said gently. "Your warning was heard eventually. It just took a war to make people listen. But because of you, because you tried, there are beings alive today who understand that fear and respect are not the same thing." Velthra died peacefully that night, her conscience finally clear. The galaxy would never be the same. 20 years had passed since the treaty was signed, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible during the darkest days of the war. The Xanthari Empire still existed, but it was no longer the dominant force that had ruled unchallenged for 12,000 years. It had become one power among many, and perhaps more importantly, it had learned humility. Ambassador Krell, now elderly even by Xanthari standards, walked slowly through the halls of Unity Station, the massive space station that served as the headquarters of the Terran Coalition. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by a dozen different species working together, each contributing their unique strengths. Xanthari gravity technology, human structural engineering, Vrin energy systems, and Costel computing had all been integrated into a structure that represented something new in galactic history. True cooperation. Krell had been appointed as the Xanthari Empire's permanent ambassador to the Coalition 5 years ago, after serving as High Chancellor for 15 years. He had spent those years reforming the Empire, transforming it from a military dictatorship into something closer to a representative government. It had been painful work, and he had made many enemies among the old guard. But the alternative had been watching the Empire collapse entirely. He entered the council chamber where the Coalition's leadership was gathering for an emergency session. The room was designed to accommodate dozens of different species, with varying atmospheric needs, gravity preferences, and sensory requirements. It was chaotic compared to the orderly Xanthari council chambers of old. But Krell had come to appreciate the chaos. It meant everyone had a voice. Admiral Sarah Chen, now Fleet Admiral of the entire Coalition Defense Force, stood at the central podium. She was 73 years old, and the decades of war and peace had etched deep lines in her face. But her eyes were still sharp, and her voice still carried the authority that had once rallied humanity against impossible odds. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Sarah said as the chamber settled. 23 hours ago, our deep space monitoring network detected something unprecedented. There is an artificial structure approaching from extragalactic space. It is massive, approximately the size of a small moon, and it is decelerating toward our galaxy. Initial scans suggest it is not natural. It appears to be a ship or vessel of some kind. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs and questions. Krell felt his heart racing. A ship from outside the galaxy meant a species they had never encountered, with technology they could not predict. "What are its intentions?" asked Representative Zintara of the Vrin. "Unknown. We have attempted communication on all known frequencies. So far there has been no response. But 3 hours ago the structure changed its trajectory. It is now heading toward the core systems of the galaxy, which means it will pass through Coalition space." "Could it be hostile?" asked the Costel representative. "We have to assume the possibility. This is why I have called this emergency session. We need to decide how to respond as a unified body. Krell raised his hand to speak. Fleet Admiral, with respect, perhaps this is an opportunity rather than a threat. We have built this coalition on the principle of peaceful cooperation. We should extend that same principle to this unknown contact. I agree, Sarah said. But we also need to be prepared for the possibility that this visitor does not share our values. The Coalition Defense Force is moving into position to intercept, but we will approach with open communication rather than weapons armed. However, if this does turn hostile, we need to be ready. The Council debated for hours but ultimately agreed on a plan. A first contact fleet would be assembled, led by both human and Xanthari ships to demonstrate the unity of the coalition. They would approach peacefully, but prepared to defend themselves if necessary. 3 days later, the first contact fleet encountered the extragalactic vessel. Up close, it was even more impressive than the initial scan suggested. The structure was a perfect sphere, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and completely unlike anything anyone in the galaxy had ever seen. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Harmony, watching the alien vessel through the view screen. Beside her stood Captain Velnix, a young Xanthari officer and the grandson of the famous Scout Commander Velthra. He had requested assignment to the first contact mission specifically because of his grandmother's legacy. Still no response to our hails, the communications officer reported. Keep trying, Sarah ordered. Broadcast in every language we know. Use mathematics, use music, use visual patterns. Something has to work. For 2 hours they tried everything they could think of, and then suddenly the sphere responded. The communication was not audio or visual. It was directly telepathic, projected into the minds of every being in the fleet simultaneously. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall. We observe, we analyze, we evaluate. Sarah struggled to form a coherent response through the mental pressure. We are the Terran Coalition. We welcome you to our galaxy. We seek peaceful contact and exchange of knowledge. You are young, you fight, you destroy. Why should we acknowledge your welcome? The fleet's sensors suddenly showed that the sphere had activated some kind of scanning beam. In seconds, it had downloaded the entire history of every species in the Coalition from their computer databases. It knew everything about them in an instant. We have seen your species, Xanthari. You conquered and oppressed humans. You fought and resisted. Vryn, tell others. You suffered and survived, and now you claim to be unified. Explain this contradiction. Krell stepped forward, requesting permission to speak. Sarah nodded. Great intelligence. I am Ambassador Krell of the Xanthari Empire. Yes, we conquered. Yes, we oppressed. And we were wrong. We learned that might does not make right. That strength without compassion is simply tyranny. We learned this lesson painfully, through a war that nearly destroyed us all. But we learned. Learning through suffering is inefficient. Perhaps, Sarah interjected, but it is also permanent. Easy lessons are easily forgotten. The lesson we learned, the lesson that cost millions of lives, is one we will never forget. We were enemies who became allies. We were oppressors who became partners. We changed because we had to, because the alternative was mutual destruction. There was a long silence. The sphere continued scanning, its surface patterns shifting more rapidly. Interesting. We are the architects. We travel between galaxies, observing civilizations at various stages of development. Most young civilizations destroy themselves through internal conflict or resource depletion. Those that survive typically do so through homogenization, eliminating diversity to achieve unity. We observe something different here: diversity maintained, conflict resolved, cooperation achieved. This is rare. This is valuable. What do you want from us? Sarah asked. We offer a choice. Your galaxy faces a threat you cannot yet perceive. In approximately 300 of your years, a force will arrive from the galactic void. It is not biological. It is not technological as you understand. Technology, it is self-replicating. Machinery that consumes all matter to create more of itself. It has destroyed 17 galaxies that we have observed. The fleet's crew exchanged horrified looks. Captain Velnix spoke up. Why are you telling us this? Why not help us? Because intervention prevents growth. Species that are saved do not develop the strength to save. themselves. But we will give you knowledge, coordinates, to ancient facilities built by previous civilizations, technology that may help you prepare. Whether you survive depends on whether you can maintain your unity for 3 centuries. Can you stay? Sarah asked. Can you teach us more? No, we observe. We do not interfere beyond this warning, but we will watch. And if you succeed where others have failed, we will return. The sphere began to move away, accelerating back toward extragalactic space. Before it left sensor range, it transmitted one final message. The humans were warned about. By the one called Velthra, she was correct. Humans are dangerous, but danger is not evil. Danger directed with purpose can save rather than destroy. You have proven this, continue to prove it. And then the sphere was gone, leaving the fleet alone with coordinates to a dozen locations scattered across the galaxy, and the knowledge that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. Sarah Chen called an immediate council session. The coordinates led to ancient structures, some of them millions of years old, left behind by civilizations that had faced the same threat. The technology they found would take centuries to understand and implement. It would require resources beyond anything they had ever attempted. It would require every species in the galaxy working together toward a common goal. 300 years, Krell said during the meeting. That gives us time. Time to prepare, time to build, time to unite even more species under the Coalition banner. It also gives us time to fall apart, Sarah countered. 300 years is a long time. People forget. Old grudges resurface. Without a clear and present threat, will species continue to cooperate? That is the real test, is it not? Krell said. The war united us through necessity. Can peace keep us united through choice? The council debated for days, but ultimately agreed on a plan. They would establish a new organization called the Galactic Defense Initiative. Every species would contribute resources and knowledge. The ancient facilities would be studied, their technology reverse-engineered and improved. And most importantly, the story of how the coalition was formed would be preserved and taught to every generation. Sarah Chen personally commissioned the writing of a comprehensive history of the war and the peace that followed. She insisted that it include the full truth, including the mistakes and atrocities committed by both sides. Scout Commander Velthra's original report was made required reading in every school in Coalition space. We cannot let future generations forget, Sarah said at the dedication ceremony for the first Galactic Defense Initiative facility. We cannot let them forget what happens when pride and arrogance prevent us from listening to warnings. We cannot let them forget the cost of war and the value of peace. Most of all, we cannot let them forget that former enemies can become the strongest allies. Krell stood beside her at the ceremony, looking out at the crowd of thousands representing dozens of species. Your grandmother would be proud, Sarah said to Captain Velnix, who was also in attendance. She tried to prevent the war, Velnix replied. She failed. No, Sarah said firmly. She did not fail. Her warning was heard eventually. And because of her, because she tried, we knew what we were facing. We knew we needed to be more than just warriors. We needed to be survivors. And survivors adapt. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a memorial to all who had died in the war, both human and Xanthari, civilian and military. At the center of the memorial was a statue showing 2 figures, one human and one Xanthari, standing back to back, weapons lowered, looking toward the stars together. Inscribed at the base were words that would become the motto of the Galactic Defense Initiative. We were warned. We did not listen. We paid the price. We learned the lesson. We will not forget. 10 years later, Sarah Chen retired from active service. She was 83 years old and had spent more than half her life in military service. She returned to Earth, to a small house in the mountains where she could see the stars clearly at night. Ambassador Krell visited her there 1 year before his own retirement. They sat on the porch, 2 old warriors who had become unlikely friends, and watched the sunset. Do you think we will be ready? Krell asked. When the threat arrives in 300 years, will our descendants be prepared? I do not know, Sarah admitted. But I know they will have something we did not have when we started. They will have unity. They will have the knowledge that cooperation is stronger than conquest. They will have the example of what we built together. Your species changed the galaxy, Krell said. You showed us that strength without compassion is weakness, that diversity is not a flaw but a strength, that the best defense is not walls but bridges. Sarah smiled. Your species taught us something too. You taught us that even the most entrenched systems can change, that pride can be set aside for survival, that former enemies can become family. We both grew. That is what matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the Galactic Defense Initiative was continuing its work. Young officers from a dozen species were training together, learning from the lessons of the past and preparing for the challenges of the future. Scientists were unlocking the secrets of the ancient facilities. Engineers were building ships designed not for war against each other, but for defense of all. The galaxy had been warned about humans. And the humans, in turn, had warned the galaxy that unity was possible, that peace could be achieved, that the future did not have to repeat the mistakes of the past. Sarah Chen died peacefully in her sleep 2 years later, at the age of 85. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the coalition. Captain Velnix, now an admiral himself, gave the eulogy. Admiral Chen once told me that her greatest fear was not dying in battle, but dying without knowing if what she fought for would last. She died knowing. Because of her, because of all who fought and all who chose peace over continued war, we stand here today as allies. We face an uncertain future, but we face it together. That is her legacy. That is all of our legacy. Ambassador Krell died 3 years after that at the impressive age of 420. His last words were reported to be, "Tell them I learned. Tell them we all learned. Tell them to remember." The galaxy remembered. And in the centuries that followed, as humanity and the other coalition species prepared for the threat to come, they built something unprecedented in galactic history. Not an empire of conquest, but a community of cooperation. Not a hierarchy of dominance, but a network of mutual support. And when the threat finally arrived, 300 years after the architect's warning, the galaxy was ready. Not because they were the strongest or the most technologically advanced, but because they had learned the lesson that nearly destroyed them. The lesson that unity, built on respect rather than fear, is the strongest force in the universe. The Zenthari had been warned about humans. They had not believed. They had paid the price, but in the end, they had learned what humans had been trying to show them all along, that the future belongs not to those who dominate, but to those who cooperate, and that was a lesson worth any price.